Welcome to Landlord Diaries, where we talk about midterm rentals and the opportunities behind them. We'll share landlord stories, talk about maximizing investment potential, and discuss how to live the very best landlord life. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Furnished Finder, the place for everything midterm rentals. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy our content.
It's your host team of the Landlord Diaries, Kelly Bailey, coming to you from the Austin, Texas area, and Katie Lyon in the Denver, Colorado area, both midterm rental enthusiasts, here to bring a new and wonderful story to you about Anne. Katie, what did you learn from Anne today?
Oh my gosh, so much, you guys. Anne is a seasoned real estate professional. She's been doing this for a long time, and she knows her stuff about a lot of stuff. So it was really cool. First, we just talked about like some general real estate advice, like some mindset, some ways that you can get a good mentor and ways to make your mentor relationship as successful as possible, and just like the power of people. And then we kind of get into the nitty gritty of, okay, what's your portfolio like? How have midterm rentals helped you? How do you structure things? And it's a really, really good conversation. We talk about so many different aspects of real estate. And she's just someone that we could talk to for hours and hours. So I foresee the possibility of a second episode with Anne because she's just that great. So please enjoy. Don't forget to subscribe on whatever you're listening to us on. It really does help us a lot. And to leave us a review. Kelly and I read those, and it's so rewarding to know that you guys are getting value out of these episodes. So please don't forget that. Also, don't forget that this episode and the entire podcast is brought to you by Furnished Finder. And Furnished Finder, our goal is to be your home for everything midterm rentals. So whether you're a traveler or a landlord, or maybe you're both, landlords can list their properties for only $99 a year on the site, and you get endless leads. You get to book directly, which benefits both the landlord and the tenant. So make sure you check out furnishedfinder.com. And here we go.
Anne Curry is in the top 1% of real estate brokers in Pierce County, Washington, which includes two prominent suburbs of Seattle, Tacoma and Bremerton. Anne has been featured on the Bigger Pockets podcast talking about her affordable housing success story, and Insider Magazine highlighting her 311-unit portfolio. Anne has sold over 1,000 homes, developed housing communities, and created homes from the ground up, including a midterm rental DADU in her backyard. And we are so excited to be here with you today. How are you doing?
I am so good, and I'm so honored to be with you too. I'm a Furnished Finder fan. Have been for the last 4 years when I was introduced to you by a friend. And I was so excited to see that you started a podcast. So I'm honored to be here, and I'm really excited.
Aw, thank you so much for sharing that. We appreciate that. Well, you have, like we've already stated, you were on the Bigger Pockets podcast, which is not how we connected. We connected with your daughter, Lauren, who's also your PR manager, right?
That's right. Yeah. And she just got her license and is working on her second property. So I'm really proud of her.
Exciting. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm sure she was a kid when you got started. And I think you have a couple other children as well. So let's start back at your background. Like, you had a dream to just change your life and make it different. So tell us a little bit about that story.
Yeah, so I was trained to be a teacher, and this was back in the 1980s. And at the time, I was making $5 an hour. And after teaching school, I would go and clean houses for $5 an hour. So very humble beginnings. My husband is a pastor. And so combined income was $14,000 a year. And we were able to actually start buying a real estate portfolio because I had met a gentleman who actually became a mentor of mine. You know, this was back, Kelly and Katie, before the internet. So there was no podcasts. There was no Furnished Finder podcast, no Bigger Pockets. All I had was to learn was from people and the good old fashioned library where you could read books. But it's really been, I mean, my story really is the success that we've had really is due to people. And I believe that everything great happens through people. So here we were, my husband and I making $14,000 a year. And we met a gentleman that just said, hey, did you know that even though you're making only $14,000 a year, you can own a home? Because I remember the day when my husband, we had just gotten married, very humble beginnings. We were, living in a little 400 square foot apartment. The bedroom was so small that we could only fit the bed, and you had to come in the back end to get in the bed because there's no room on the side.
Oh,
so
man.
This place was tiny. And, he just said to us, did you know that you could still own a home? And to me, that was just like, oh, wow. Because my husband and I had just decided, hey, we're going to dedicate our life to the ministry, and we may never own a home. So he showed us the way. We borrowed $6,000 from my husband's aunt, and we bought this little 2-bedroom house, and we fixed it up. We added the value to it. We stayed there for 8 years. In that period, we had our 2 kids. So it was 4 of us living in this little 900 square foot house. But it was a time in the market was in our favor. It was a time in the market when our equity rose. Of course, we did the exterior painting. We did the interior painting. I mean, just all the grunt work to take this little kind of fixer, tiny little 900 square foot box, and we increased the value. And right about at that time, I met my second mentor, who taught me how to basically do the BRRRR model. And the BRRRR stands for buy a house, so buy a fixer, renovate it, put a renter in it, so rent it out, then refinance it, and then repeat the process. So he taught me that model, and it wasn't called BRRRR back then. There was no acronyms for this stuff. He was just a very wise older gentleman that had done that himself. And he was in his 70s at the time. And that's how they were able to acquire a rental portfolio, even though they were in the ministry. So that's what we did. We took this little 2-bedroom house that we were just squeezed in for 8 years. We let the equity rise. We bought it as a fixer. We renovated it on our own kind of, elbow grease. We decided that we would put a renter inside of it, and we would go buy another property, because as owner occupants, you can buy with a low down payment. And that is the classic house hack BRRRR model. That's really how we got started. So we just did that method, over and over a few times, kept moving into additional homes that we were able to buy as owner occupants and keep the last house as a rental. So it was a very organic, origin story, but it was all because we had people that taught us, how to do that. So, 30 years later, now we have, we've been blessed to have, this 300 and a little over 300 units. But it was really this organic, very humble beginnings, just do a few things right. And then the momentum kind of sped up, and here we are today.
I love that for so many reasons. I think the first thing that strikes me is that you weren't trying to do everything overnight. I think in today's, with social media and with everything, everyone's like, you can get properties and become a millionaire overnight, or, make this much overnight, or scale this big, this quick. And it's like, that's not like, sure, you can do that, but is it the right way? Right. And when you think about, this is probably a silly analogy, but when you think about like a baby who's learning to walk, or a toddler who's learning to walk, they spend a long time just figuring out how to walk. And then, like you said, you can use that momentum and you can really take off and scale, but doing it the right way and taking the time to really learn and digest and process and have those people on your side is so valuable.
Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Furnished Finder, the ultimate platform for hassle-free midterm rentals. Whether you're a seasoned landlord or just getting started, Furnished Finder is the place for you. With Furnished Finder, you can say goodbye to booking fees and hello to direct bookings for 30-day plus days. It's a win-win for everyone involved. So if you're ready to experience the joys of midterm renting and take a load off your landlord's shoulders, head over to FurnishedFinder.com today. We make it easy to get started. We're grateful to Furnished Finder for sponsoring this episode, and we're sure you'll love what they have in store for you.
So valuable. I mean, to have the mentors that I had, I wouldn't have anything if it hadn't have been for these mentors. I mean, I really owe them everything, and I honor them to this day. You know, it's been 30 years of meeting the right people, and I believe that was serendipitous, you know, and of course I'm a faith person, so I believe that the Lord brought the right people. But you're so right, Katie, and I think there's a lot of disappointed people out there that really want to jump into the real estate game, but all they hear is like, you can get rich quick and you can quit your job and you're going to have all this cash flow at the very beginning. And I did not find that was the case. In fact, I'm a big proponent and, you know, I have a lot of units now. However, I am teaching my own daughter who's working on her second property. I am teaching her, Lauren, this is a get rich slow game. And this is what I also tell my clients. I preach a get rich slow. And I'll tell you why, because there's no magic pill. This does not go fast. It's to do it right is to do it a little bit slower. And what I'm teaching her is, hey, listen, if you just make a goal of 5 properties in your lifetime, in our area in Washington, so we're a coastal state, and if you look historically over the last 50 years, real estate doubles in our area every 10 years. So if you really think about that, and you buy 5 properties, and I just said, honey, you know, if you just buy 5, concentrate on 5. Let's start
Tangible goals, right?
Tangible goals. And in 20 years, those could quadruple in value. So let's say you buy a $200,000 house, you fix it up, now it's worth $300,000. That property in 10 years is going to be worth $600,000. In another 10 years is going to be worth $1.2 million. All the while, your tenants are paying that mortgage payment for you in the form of rent, right? So they're paying this down. So your loan your loan balance is going down, your equity is going up. How many of those houses that are going to be worth $1.2 million in 20 years, how many of those do you really need to have a really beautiful life, right, and be able to create your own future? Yeah. So I really believe that if people just start with the very tangibles, and if you get excited about real estate, absolutely, this is a very deep ocean, real estate is. There are so many, and you guys both know because you're doing it too, that there is so many strategies and so many things to learn and so many different components to a strategy that as you get into it, you start putting really cool things together, like midterm rentals, right? So doing a BRRRR strategy and then renting to a midterm rental. I mean, there's so much. And you can go really, really, really deep. I'm more about going deep than going wide. Now, in 30 years, we've been able to go deep and wide, but that's over a 30-year career. That's not, my first 6 months in real estate. So I'm teaching my clients the same thing that I'm teaching my daughter. And if it's good enough for my daughter, it's also good enough for my clients. Start with a tangible goal. And then if you get really excited about real estate and you want to keep going, then all the better. But let's just start with something that is going to completely change your whole future. You can get wealthy with just 5 houses. Absolutely. And I think that's actually really exciting and takes the pressure off that, I know it's really sexy to say, hey, in the first 5 years, you can own 100 units. That's awesome for the people that want to do that. But I want to talk to the person that just is like, I'm working full time. I've got 3 kids. I want to change the wealth in my future, but I'm not going to be able to do this, full time. and I don't have 30 years.
Yeah, that resonates personally with me a lot because when our first rental property is actually our old house we used to live in. We built it, right? Well, we didn't build it, a builder built it, but we picked out the floor color and did all the fun stuff. And when it came time that we were going to move, we were in a neighborhood where a lot of people were moving to the next neighborhood over. And we saw all of our good friends put their house up for the market because they had appreciated. They went through that big appreciation bubble we all had. So they were all cashing in on the gains. And I'm like, man, that's really tempting. But then I was like, what if we kept it? Because at the time, my personal employment history, I've worked for small businesses a lot in my history. And I was like, I don't have the 401k that these people have. So it's like, maybe that house is my 401k, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we still use it as a rental. And when everyone would say, what are you doing? Are you sure? What if the toilet gets plugged? What if you get a call from a tenant at midnight? What if they trash it? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, guys, this is my retirement. That house is my retirement. Like you all have your nicely backed at the time. I was working for all these small companies. I didn't have those. And I was like, that's my retirement. And then you saw kind of something shift in their mind. It was like, oh, like you're not actually like, this is a part of like a big plan. And so, but you're right. It's not a get rich quick thing. Sure, you can make cash flow off properties, absolutely, but the true wealth in real estate is long-term gains, right?
This is a great time for us to transition to what you were already building on, Anne, which was there's so many different real estate strategies to pursue. So I want to hear, we already heard that you started with the BRRRR method and remodeling, like fixing it up, renting it out, and then pulling that money out to move on to the next property. Well, at some point you started adding multifamilies and affordable housing into that. So what all different real estate strategies have you pursued over the years and are currently pursuing?
Started out, as I discussed we're doing the BRRRR model, which is buy a fixer, fix it up, put a renter in it, and then refinance out, hopefully grab some of that equity back so that I could turn around and reuse that same money for the same property. Then, I did that a couple times, and then I realized I was still running out of funds, because even though you love to pull all the money back out on a refinance, sometimes you have to leave some in the property. And so I would run out of cash, and then I'd think, well, I guess I just need to sell it, which became a flipping strategy. So went from BRRRR to flipping. Then we scaled from single family, and then bought a duplex. And then I bought a triplex, and then I bought a fourplex. So we kind of call it the stack, starting with a single family and organically kind of growing and scaling up. But it was in these kind of stair-step moves. Meanwhile, I figured out that flipping really was a great way to get the chunks of cash that I could put back into rental real estate. So yeah, we had a very wise person in our life, just counsel my husband and I that if we could continue to live on my husband's income, then everything that I was doing in real estate went back into real estate. So I don't think we were always successful at that, but I think for the most part, we really tried to live on his income. And then every time I did a real estate, because I didn't want to have my income, having to support the daily, living and life, because then I had to do it. I had 2 little kids at home. And when I started in real estate, I was being a full-time mom, but doing this on the side. So kind of, juggling all of that. But we just kept, recycling the same money, and then every once in a while having to sell a property. So that became this whole flipping angle. And I started doing more of that, got a couple contractors under me. I was, being the project manager, but we were scaling up into the small multifamily. And then my big, kind of one of my big breaks came when I had a goal of owning a 20-unit apartment building. I mean, that was the big goal. And, just about the time that I made that goal, I found myself at a fundraising dinner. And I sat down and introduced myself to the gentleman next to me. And I just said, I'm Ann. What's your name? He said, I'm John. I said, what do you do for a living? He said, I build apartment buildings. And, there was a serendipitous moment. And for the whole 2-hour dinner, I think we ignored everyone else at our table and we talked for 2 hours about real estate. And at the end of it, he invited me to come to his office the next day. And he said, you have a goal of owning 20 units. I want to help you. I'm going to introduce you to some key players that can help you get there. And I want to mentor you through. So it wasn't long after that he and his, commercial real estate agent brought me a 60-unit apartment building. So 20 went to 60. And we were able to buy it with the help of a partner. I didn't have that money. I didn't have the financial liquidity or the strength to buy a 60-unit apartment building. But, when the opportunity came, I presented it to a friend of my husband and I's, and I sat down and my mentor coached me on how to talk to him. And for an hour, I laid out all the numbers I'd studied. I was so nervous in driving to that appointment. I think I was sweating. I had those crazy butterflies. And I just kept rehearsing in my mind what I was going to say to him. And I laid it all out, walked him through the whole thing. And I said, would you like to partner? And he said, yes. And that was a really key moment. So we closed on the 60 unit. It needed $1 million worth of rehab.
Wow.
But, because I had all that experience doing the single families, obviously it was a lot larger, but it was just a lot larger. It wasn't any more complicated. It was just a bigger project, but it was probably the most fun I've ever had. So we did this $1 million remodel. We refinance, so it's almost like a BRRRR on steroids, a BRRRR on a 60-unit apartment building. Did the reno, got the rents up, refinanced out. I was able to pull off enough cash to repay this partner half of his down payment. And that was a really beautiful partnership. So we split, the equity 50-50, we split the rents 50-50. I still own that building today. That was a while ago when I bought that. My single family mentors
real fast. When did affordable housing enter the picture? Was it with this first unit?
Hey landlords, are you ready to level up your rental game and simplify your life? Well, get ready to meet your new best friend, KeyCheck. KeyCheck is your all-in-one solution for stress-free property management with tenant-paid screenings, rent payment processing, online lease creation with e-sign, and a suite of incredible landlord tools. You'll wonder how you ever lived without it. No more chasing down checks or sifting through piles of applications. KeyCheck helps you organize and manage all things landlording in a simple and efficient way. So if you're tired of the rental chaos and crave seamless, efficient management, head over to keycheck.com and sign up today. Make landlord life a breeze with KeyCheck, the game changer for modern property owners.
Yeah, that was my best. That was the 60-unit apartment building, was an affordable project. It had received, we bought it from the Tacoma Housing Authority. Now, housing authorities are not in the business to sell property, but when the property gets to a certain age or a certain point after it's been remodeled and it needs a big capital infusion, they have to pay what's called prevailing wages, which is about 30 or 40% more than just as private people that we have to pay a contractor. So a contractor is 40% or 30% more, windows are 30% more, roof is 30, everything is 30% more. So they're going to offload and they're going to take those funds and they're going to reinvest into a newer product. So this property came with a covenant. It had received a grant for the remodel that they had did 18 years prior. And it was an affordability covenant that basically said every single unit has to be rented by a tenant that has a percentage of the median income. So there's a whole formula to it, but let's just call it an affordable building. And I had rented to Section 8 before. In fact, my single family mentor had marched me down to the local housing authority, introduced me as a new housing provider in the area. And my very first tenant in one of my single family rentals was a Section 8 tenant. And so I cut my teeth on, incorporating affordable housing into my portfolio. And I loved these people. And, I think the misnomer of affordable housing is that it makes or breaks, it's a good tenant or a bad tenant. These are just people that happen to get a housing voucher to help them pay their rent. It doesn't make them a good tenant or a bad tenant. My best tenants were my Section 8 tenants. So when I was, entertaining buying the 60 unit, I was so excited that here's this whole building has this affordability covenant, and it's going to provide, safe and beautiful housing to folks that, can't afford to pay all of their rent. And coming from very humble beginnings, that was, it was a tug on my heart to be, at least a little itty bitty tiny solution in this great, big, huge, complex problem that we have, which is called affordable housing. So,
I have so many thoughts here. I have so many thoughts.
Me too.
We'll dig in. Yeah. The other part of that story is, I developed this really beautiful relationship with the Tacoma Housing Authority. When I bought the 60 unit, they mentioned that they had these 50 single family houses. And I just said to them, hey, if you ever want to sell the houses, would you please call me? Well, let's back up to 13 years prior to that. My first single family mentor owned 50 single family homes. Okay. When I met him, I was making $5 an hour. I was a mom, but I was teaching school, cleaning houses for $5 an hour. I met him when he introduced himself to me. I said, what do you do for a living? He said, full time, I run my rentals. I said, how many do you have? And he said, I have 50. And I was blown away. Again, this is before the internet. So you're not hearing these great stories of people doing all this big stuff. And at that moment, I made this pact, this goal inside my heart, and I kept it very private. But I said, I am going to own 50 single family houses someday. He took me under his wing for about 7 years, and I just learned from him. So this is kind of going back. Now, fast forward 4 years after I bought that 60 unit, the housing authority called me. And they said, Ann, we want to sell the 50 single family homes.
Aww.
Are you interested in buying them? They said, we don't want to put them on the market. We loved working with you. We know you're going to take great care of these tenants, and we want to sell it to you if you want it. And without knowing how, I just said, yes, I will do it. I would love to do it. And inside I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? But it was my goal just coming to me. And to own, the big goal was 50 single family homes, and I was able to buy them in one transaction. My same partner partnered with me on those. It took 1.5 years to put the deal together because we're talking about people, we're talking about the HUD. It had a HUD covenant, so we had to kind of work through that. But it was a beautiful, just kind of the ending to that goal. But you asked what else I was doing. So that transitioned into that big purchase.
I think Katie and I have a lot of thoughts adding into what you're saying. So let's go ahead and jump into some of those. Katie, I'll let you go first.
You're telling your story, and two things are kind of coming to mind. And the first is something you said, where real estate is a very deep ocean, right? And Kelly and I talk with guests a lot about this, how there's a lot of different ways to invest in real estate. There's a lot of different ways to make investing beneficial for yourself. Midterm rentals is obviously first and foremost on our mind, but there's also a million different ways you can do midterm rentals, right? There's medical professionals, there's corporate housing, there's insurance, there's digital nomad, there's all these different things, right? The point is that there's so many different things, and somehow you landed on the little island of providing housing for Section 8 tenants, or like you said, tenants that need a little bit of assistance, which is incredible. I think the other thing that really stuck with me, and this is where I'd like your insight for the listeners, is you keep circling back to these mentors and how important it is to have that these mentors, the important role that they played in getting you to where you are now. And that was before the days of the internet. Now we live in a world where we're all online. So we're all connected, but we're all also perhaps as alone as we've ever been. We work from home. We don't go to as many events. We're connected, but very, very apart, right?
And a lot of mentors cost a decent amount of money nowadays as well.
Right. And that's the other thing is we're also in a space where everybody wants a mentor, but doesn't necessarily want it to be a two-way relationship, right? And I have a feeling that a lot of people like yourself and people who have made a name for themselves or gotten to a certain level within real estate probably get asked to be mentors all the time. So how did you, A, make sure that you were always giving value back to that mentor, right? And what do you look for today when you're looking for a mentee? And like, how do you just make sure that that relationship is a two-way street? Because obviously a mentor is always going to give you more information, more value than you have to give to them. But I've always been taught and had the mindset that if someone is helping you out, like you need to help them out in some way, right? Like it needs to
Yeah.
be a two-way relationship, even if by nature it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, everything great happens through people. So we start there. And uh, mentors, sometimes you don't know what they're going to look like. They don't just wear a badge that say, I'm a mentor, ask me for help. I think one of the best things, and I had nothing to give when I started. I mean, I was teaching school and I was cleaning
But
houses.
I would disagree with that. I would say that you were eager to learn and you probably gave a positive attitude. And I'm sure that if your mentor needed some help tearing down a wall, I don't know this, but like you were the first one to raise your hand, right?
Yeah, yeah, Katie, and I really did want to be useful somehow with whatever I had. So I'm a big proponent of everybody has something to give, even if you feel like it's a little itty bitty tiny seed. You have something. And when I met my first mentor, who was my single family mentor that owned the 50 houses, I just said, I will do anything. I will clean floors. I will cut hedges. I will scrub toilets. If you just show me the way, I will work for you for free. I mean, what did I have to lose? I was making $5 an hour. So, and so he did. He asked me to come help him and I worked for free. And in turn, he just kind of showed me the way. I think on the flip side, for folks that have succeeded in some way, you get to a point, and this is where I'm at in my career, is that I get so excited when people ask me because real estate and has done so much for my family. It's totally changed the whole trajectory of our life because money is just a tool, but money can do such wonderful things. We were able to help both our kids buy their first house, which, then they can use, that house to grow more of their own wealth. We're huge in giving to charity because, we're still very active in the church world. All the wonderful things that money can do. So I've experienced that. So when people get excited about real estate, I'm just like, yeah, let's go. When after I was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, we announced that I would do 30-minute calls with whoever wanted to, talk. And, Lauren was filling my calendar and I was just doing these 30-minute calls. So that's not true mentorship. That might be more inspirational, but sometimes we just need somebody to get our hands on the handlebars. And if they tell us where to start, then, in this day and age, Katie, you're right. I mean, a lot of us are alone, but we do have access to Furnished Finder podcast. I probably still I bet I take in 10 hours of content a week. I listen to all of your podcasts. I listen to all the Bigger Pockets. Ken McElroy, I listen to all of his stuff because it is such a big, deep ocean that you're always wanting to learn more. The other part about it is when you're first starting out, it can feel so overwhelming to hear all the strategies. I mean, if you listen to 8 podcasts in a week, when you're first learning, it's just like, well, I don't know. I'm even more confused because I don't even know where to start. And it's like, do I do midterm? Do I do Airbnb? Do I do, apartments? Do I do single family? I mean, I'm so confused, but I think what it's doing is not necessarily telling you where to start, but it's acclimating and getting your mindset ready to receive when you do get a start, that you have heard it, you're more comfortable with it. I think the most powerful thing I did early on, quite honestly, and I'm a very I would consider myself more of an introvert than an extrovert. So I'm
Katie
not going to be your
too.
one.
I still don't
I'm not,
believe it.
I'm not going to be your girl that's like
Oh my gosh.
the most talkative at a party. I mean, if I can get with one person and talk to them, like I love to go deep, but I'm not going wide at a social event, you know? But I think I just learned that I think because my desire was so strong, I was willing to at least blurt out the words, "Hi, I'm Anne. What's your name? What do you do? And can you show me how?"
You put yourself in the right place because you were was it a real estate event where you met him?
It was actually at a just a nonprofit fundraiser.
God just
But
said,
I
let me
really,
put y'all next to each other.
yeah, I really believe that when you're looking for something, you're going to magnetize it to you. You're going to magnetize the right people. You're going to magnetize the wrong people away. Just like a magnet can, if you turn it
And
around,
at the right
it's gonna magnetize
time.
out. And at the right time. Yeah.
Because I think what else I heard you say in there is that there's different levels of mentors, and we all have mentors in our lives, even if we have never met them, right? The podcasts you listen to, the books you read, the people you follow who are educational in nature, those can serve as mentors. Anyone who is teaching you and guiding you to think new things and learn in different ways is a mentor, whether it's someone you text, you call, you meet in person, or whether it's someone who you simply consume public information from. So I think that's also a really good thing to keep in mind, is that mentors come in all different levels and shapes and sizes, and that it's just it doesn't have to be a one size fits all thing.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
We've had the coaching hat on for about 20 to 30 minutes now, and I think everyone is motivated. They are ready to jump in. So let's now transition to the midterm rental conversation so they have that opportunity to get some tangible takeaways of what you're doing in your midterm rental game, which is really amazing. So we're breaking it down into two sections. We're going to talk about your DADU, which I'll let you explain, that you have in your backyard. And then we're going to transition to your newest property, which is a 168 unit complex that you have some midterm rental plans for. But first, do you think the midterm rental strategy works for affordable housing? Because I was sitting here thinking, it wouldn't, an affordable housing guest doesn't necessarily want luxury. They just want home, right? So it wouldn't be that expensive to furnish a property. Is that doable in the affordable housing game to be a midterm rental host?
Yeah, well, you know, Kelly, so let's think of our tenants that would be looking for affordable housing. They're more looking for a long-term solution. A Section 8 housing voucher, it goes year to year. So when you're a housing provider and you're accepting a tenant that has a Section 8 voucher, you're committing to them for a year. So I think might be a little bit, you might be able to do some kind of hybrid. I'd have to probably think about that a little bit more for the midterm, 3-month stays for affordable.
It's like you furnish it and they pay the utilities or something like that, right?
Something like that. I think that would be fun to explore that whole angle.
Okay, we just found a new section of the ocean, you guys.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully that's not where the sharks are swimming.
I was going to make a different reference of where someone went down and got crushed. We won't go there.
No, we won't go there. Our first midterm rental was kind of by accident in that 5 years ago, we built our house. And when we built our house, we had this idea, and this was before DADUs, detached accessory dwelling units, which some people just call an apartment in your backyard. That's all it is. A DADU is an apartment in your backyard. When we built our house, kind of maybe midstream down the process of working with our architect, I'm like, why don't we put an apartment above our garage in case our adult children want to come home and visit? Because at the time they both lived out of state. And what we found was we built this great 1-bedroom apartment above our garage. It's super cool. It's cute as all get out because I thought I'm doing this for my kids. And what I found was when the kids came home, they wanted to stay in the main house. So here was this little apartment that just sat empty. And right after, one of my friends introduced me to Furnish Finder, and she said, hey, we just put a traveling nurse in our little unit here. And I'm like, traveling nurse? And, this is 5 years ago. So this is kind of when it just really started to kind of popular here. I mean, maybe it was, popular way, where you guys are earlier on. But I did. I put we did Furnish Finder. We got a wonderful traveling nurse, and we have not. It's rare to go more than a week without a vacancy in this little apartment. So we've loved it. You get to know them. They come from all over. It's been great, and they're in our backyard. So they make beautiful tenants, and that was our introduction to Furnish Finder. Well, I got excited about it. So then I turned a few of our other units into, furnished rentals. Same thing, Furnish Finder, found our tenants, have had a beautiful experience. And so I'm more of a conservative risk taker. I like to kind of try a strategy out, see how it works before I go all in. There's a lot of people that are like, okay, I'm going to do 100 of those, right off the bat. And I'm more like, let me kind of try one out and see how it goes. Yeah, let me try one and then let's see how it goes. So then we added more units. I bought fortunate enough to purchase a 168 unit portfolio from an 80-year-old man off market, but it was 168 units across 44 parcels. So let me break that down. So that kind of looks like a bunch of duplexes, a few triplexes, a 6-unit, a 7-unit, a 12, a 14, a 20. So 44 parcels, 168 units. Every single property has its own little mini business plan, but we have this really cool 14 unit that happens to be right across the street from the water. So where we live, it's saltwater bay, but it's just, water is, everybody wants to be close to the water. But it's just dilapidated, the worst real estate. I mean, in the form of the building, bed bugs, cockroaches, leaking
super
roofs.
distressed.
I mean, it's just, it's beyond. But I can do this stuff now, basically with my eyes closed. So I mean, nothing surprises me anymore. But it's this really cool location, but horrible building. We're halfway done with renovating all 14 units. It's a mile away from the hospital. So, and the way these are situated is right out the main windows, you can see this beautiful blue water. So we've turned them into these little 1-bedroom cottages. And I think they're just going to be a hit with the traveling nurse.
I watched your video on Instagram, and I think they're totally going to be a hit. What a great view, and a mile from the hospital. That is so
and also
nice.
like what you've given to the city, right? Like you've turned these things around, and then in turn you've served the travel nurses who are serving the community. So I see your core and the service mindset that you have from serving the Section 8 tenants where, not everyone will get into that, right? And turning these old properties into something good. It's Kelly and I, there's like a special place for people who take business and also revolve it around doing things that do good, right? And that's where Furnish Finder started, was let's give good housing to all of these travel nurses.
I don't want to miss this opportunity to make sure. I want you to tell the story, Anne, of how you found Bremerton in the first place through watching comps on a duplex in that area. You're like, what?
Yeah, that was an eye-opening moment. So I'm always, I'm a real estate agent. So I have my license so that I can, serve people in that capacity with traditional sales. We have a lot of investor clients, but I love having my license so that I can search, the MLS and be always watching for properties and watching what's going on. So I live in Tacoma, Washington, Pierce County. Kitsap County is where Bremerton's located. It's about 30 miles from Tacoma. but it's always been a little bit of a sleeper. So as, the market has gotten, more expensive, and even my area, I've watched, kind of prices start to creep up. Gets a little bit harder to do what we love to do, which is BRRRR or invest and rent and make all the numbers make sense. So I've been watching Bremerton for a little while, but the moment that it totally turned for me was when I was searching the MLS in this little duplex, which would normally sell for about $450,000, sold for $825,000. I thought it was a typo. So when I saw that, I called the agent and I just said, "What is going on?" And she said, "Well, the owner turned both into midterm rentals, and she was getting, X amount more rent than would traditionally be, had at these little units. And because of that, it was basically sold on the income. And that's a very commercial apartment building, 5 units and up, tactic is apartment buildings are sold on the income that they receive. You don't normally see that in duplexes. However, she said, "Anne, I could have sold this building 16 times over. We had so many offers." And it was all because she was renting to midterm. It was a midterm rental. Her rents were higher. The appraiser used the higher rents, and the folks that bought it were buying it on the income. So that was the moment where I was just like, oh my goodness. And then she went on to explain to me that she owns some duplexes that are also midterm rentals herself. She's an agent.
Nice.
She wasn't the owner of this building. And she just said there's such a need, because it's also, Bremerton has a naval base. So you have, naval officers coming in and out of port all the time. And sometimes they don't have, they might be gone for a year. When they come back, they love to, pick up a little short-term rental where they're trying to, get their, long-term plans figured out. You have, the Naval Hospital, you have another, civil hospital nearby. And so she said the need is greater than what we have. So when that, portfolio, 168 unit portfolio came to me, that's why we listen. That's why we learn, because you don't know if you need that information at the time, but you hear it and, it's just like a little seed in your heart. And then when something comes up, you're like, that. Because I remember 6 months ago, I talked to that, agent about that. So it all kind of comes up. So, again, I'm just a huge proponent of, listening to Furnish Finder podcasts, listening to other podcasts, getting all of that in your spirit so that you can recognize it when it comes to you. And I just think that that's a huge part of being successful in this business.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what's next for you?
What's next? Well, we have 90 units in construction. So land that I bought 4 or 5 years ago, and it just takes, forever to get permits, as you guys know. So we have new construction, 80 units in new construction. That's right here in my backyard in Tacoma. And then I'm working on the 168 units, because every one of those, properties, the 44 properties, all have their own little business plan. We have, we always have between 4 and a dozen flips going on, because I can do those pretty easily, because I'm so used to doing them, 30 years of doing that. Have a general contractor that I hired full time and his whole crew. So all he does is work on my stuff. So, it just, the progression of when you start in this business and how hard everything is, finding the right contractor. I mean, I've been through a few contractors that were real doozies. So, just the progression of working through all the kinks, and now, you just kind of smooth out your processes. You figure out, what works and what doesn't. Of course, that always makes things easier. So those are the, that's what I have going on, and
Awesome.
it's fun. But 160 units has been just, the whole, it's like putting together a big puzzle.
It's not a small task.
Every piece, no. But it's fun, because to me, that's been the challenge. And I like a good little challenge every once in a while, just to keep me feeling like I'm alive, but.
Well, we have 3 more things left to talk about that and you wanted to make sure and coach others on this episode. And one of them is how to create opportunity in this market and the importance of having an exit strategy in that opportunity as well.
Yeah, so important. So I always like to have at least 2 exit strategies. I mean, 3 is awesome, but 2 is a magic number. So what I mean by exit strategy is when you buy a piece of property, you want to know that you can exit out of it in 2 different ways so that you're not completely stuck and you don't back yourself into a corner. So that might look like buying a single family home and it works as a rental, or it could work as a flip. Buying a piece of dirt and knowing that I could, put a single family home, or I could put a duplex with a DADU. So having 2 different ways, because sometimes the market can shift on you and one way may no longer work. Obviously keeping in touch with what's going on in the market and talking to local folks. And we haven't talked about the value of, talked about mentors, but there's some real tangible mentors in the forms of really great real estate agents that are also investors. I mean, they can become one of your best advocates and one of your best mentors because they're tactically taking you through things. But yeah, so having, multiple exit strategies. And what was the other question, Kelly? I'm sorry, I lost train of thought.
Yeah, how to create opportunities in this market with interest rates being higher and everything going on.
Yes, back in the day, so after the big crash of 2008, I could open up the MLS and I could find out of 20 properties, 10 that would work either as a flip or a rental.
Nice.
Now we're not so, fortunate. It's tougher to make a great deal. And what I mean by that is there's more competition, interest rates are higher, properties are more expensive. So to create a great deal isn't just going to be shifted to you on a silver platter, like here's this perfect deal and you can just close on it and it's just all going to work. Now we have to create opportunity. So that might look like in our area, we're now able to build DADUs. Those are the apartments in your backyard on any single family property. This is brand new. So this is just a year.
Huge.
And
that's huge.
Oh, huge.
I mean, talk about instant equity to any house.
I have not been more excited about a strategy. So we're going to be, we do a lot of free education. And we advertise that on our social media, but we're going to be interviewing the mayor of our city and all about this whole DADU and how it works. And because it's so new, people are still trying to figure it out. But we've done a lot of education on our social media around it because it's so exciting. And lots of cities are following in this footsteps. Seattle's been doing it for the last couple of years. Tacoma is now doing it. But a lot of our listeners come from all over. So talk to your city council and ask them if they have any plans for DADUs, because a lot of them are adopting it because it is going to help solve the lack of housing that every city is experiencing. 5 million is the number that I heard across the United States, that we need 5 million more homes or residences.
Now, let me ask you, Anne, how does that work with an HOA? Because I know a lot of people, when they think about their primary residence, they're like, oh, that would be perfect, except the dreaded 3 letters.
Yeah, HOA is going to be tougher because obviously that's their own, they can have their own rules. So I don't buy anything in an HOA. I mean, unless I'm really, certain that my strategy is going to fit the rules of the HOA. But I'm talking about more, you have a backyard. There's going to be rules about what you can build and how big it can be. And, in our area, it can only be a percentage of the square footage of the main house. So there's some, but there's going to be DADU specialists popping up in every city. I connected to one really early on. We've done a bunch of we've done a bunch of videos together that we've showed on our social media, just because I want to educate. I want this to happen because it's going to help solve the housing issue. But so when I talk about creating a deal and not just finding a deal, it's building a DADU. It's taking a basement and adding square footage. So I'll give you an example. A month ago, we just closed on this house that was advertised as a rambler. But when I went over there, I realized it has a full basement. So the same square footage of the main floor was, I was downstairs as well. It was just unfinished, but the ceilings were high. And I thought, all right, I'm going to be able to double the square footage of this house, whereby then you're going to increase the value of that house. So those are the things that you can do
You need
to
to just
create the deals. Yeah.
look a little bit more creatively. Yeah.
More creative. Yeah. DADUs, adding square footage. Sometimes you can find a little rambler and it'll have an attached garage. Turn that attached garage into more living square footage. Now you're adding value to the house.
Right.
You lose a garage, but the appraiser is going to appraise it on the finished square footage of the house. You don't get as much for a garage. So creating buying the fixers, I never buy anything that's done and pretty. That's not how you create, the exponential wealth. Meaning I could buy a house for 300 grand, but it's going to be worth 300 grand if it's already fixed up. I like to buy it for 200 grand, fix it up, and have it be worth 400. So that's when, you're really kind of moving that, that wealth along.
I think it's interesting because even if in that flip margin, you've got to be creative still, right? And you can say, okay, here's a flip that no one's touching because X, well, maybe the price is higher because there's low inventory. So I need to flip it and I need to add a bedroom and I need to turn that garage into some extra square footage. So sometimes you've got to combine your little mindsets there.
You really do. And the more you can do, so in that same house that was the Rambler that happened to have the basement, we're going to turn the basement into a second apartment. So you'll have the main house will be an apartment. The downstairs will be an apartment. I lost it for a second. In addition, because now Tacoma allows DADUs, we're going to build a garage with a DADU on the top. So now we have 3 units on the same property where it was just one. And of course it needed work. Another property that we just bought was fire damaged. So it had a fire, but we're having to work harder, right? So we are working harder to do the same thing that we were doing a few years ago. We didn't have to work as hard. There was a day where you could just buy a house, put lipstick on a pig, they call it, paint it, clean up the landscape, and it's going to be worth, $50,000 more. We're not finding those deals. So we're buying the fire damage stuff. So this house was completely torched. So we're having to kind of, go through the full permitting. It's almost kind of like rebuilding it, but it also can get a DADU with a garage in the back. So I'll end up with 2 units, but it's just way more of a heavy lift. But that's what's working in this market, is really looking for the ones that have the most amount of opportunity. That can be done with duplexes, triplexes. Strategy wise, for our newer investors that are watching, house hacking, that's just all house hacking is buying a house as an owner occupant, because you only need between 3 and 5% down, versus if you're going to buy a rental property, you need, 25 to 30% down. So 3.5 to 5%. And sometimes if you're going FHA, that can also be a gift. So imagine somebody can gift you your down payment. You do that. You have to stay there for a year. But after the year, put a tenant in it and go buy another, house as an owner occupant. This is exactly what I'm teaching my daughter to do. And in those cases, go ahead and buy something retail. Retail meaning it's pretty, it's fixed up, it's remodeled, because you can buy that with low down payment, not have to put a bunch of cash into it. And that, in that case, buying something pretty and cute totally works. Do that, live there for a year, put a renter in it, go do it again. So save up that 3 to 5% down again and go do it, and do that as many times until you're completely sick of it. And this is what my daughter's doing. Yeah, this is what Lauren's doing. And so she's working on her second one. And so this is a great way for folks to get started. So talk about putting the handles on the handlebars. That's what you should do to get started, because you really don't need a lot of capital. You don't need all that, cash in the bank to do what we just described. Do that until you have enough equity in those houses that you've, bought as an owner occupant, to then take that equity and start, going after, some more buildings. But you could do it. You could buy a duplex that way. Mm-hmm. You could buy a triplex as an owner occupant. You could buy a 4 unit as an owner occupant.
That was Dave and I's first purchase, was a duplex. I I think that is phenomenal advice to wrap up this episode. Katie, you want to talk about any last things before we go ahead and have Ann share the best way for people to follow her? Any last things?
No, I can't think of a way that we could have added more information or value
Such great quality
into this conversation. Like we could sit here and talk to Ann for hours and hours and hours, because I feel like we could pick any of these little topics, and I feel like you could give us just a breadth of knowledge. But I think just, talking about knowing your strategy and, having the right people in your life and exploring and giving yourself the gift of time without the pressure. It's so huge. And I think just a reminder that so many people needed to hear. So
yeah,
I think that's wonderful.
Thank you. And thank you guys for doing this podcast. I mean, it's of such a value to people, and when they're getting started and hearing all these strategies and you guys being out there and doing it yourselves. I mean, how valuable it is to have you as mentors to all these other people that are listening. So I honor you, and Furnished Finders has been such a wonderful tool for me, and just so happy that I found you 5 years ago. You can find us, Ann at Ann Curry or Ann Curry Homes on Insta. We do a lot of, little educational videos, and we do free live events. And so, we'd love to have you follow us.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Ann. We appreciate each one of you listening in. I've had a couple people comment saying Mondays are my favorite when we release our podcast, and that is just so sweet of y'all. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.